Good afternoon, and welcome to the Outdoor Art Club presentation, Peace Building in the Front Lines, A Search for Common Ground, with Judy Kimamo, Director of Swahili Coast Programs, Search for Common Ground, and Jacqueline Oburu, VP of Human Resources, Search for Common Ground. My name is Deborah Duck, and I'm working with fellow OAC Zoom team member Lily Stamets to bring you today's program. For those of you not familiar with the Outdoor Art Club, we are a nonprofit women's organization founded in 1902. The club engages in civic, cultural, and charitable work in our community. This month, we are hosting a spring donation drive for the Canal Alliance, and in the first weekend of June, we will welcome back the Marin Masters Fine Art Show and benefit to our clubhouse. As you know, we are using the Zoom webinar platform today. Zoom has two different functions, one for chat and one for Q&A. Please enter all of your questions into Q&A, and our speakers are saving time at the end of the program to answer them. At this time, I'd like to introduce Carol Banker. Carol is a member of the Outdoor Art Club and is the program chair for today's event. Welcome, Carol. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted that you've joined us for today's event. Thank you. My name is Carol Banker, and I've been a donor to Search for Common Ground since my introduction at a fundraiser more than 20 years ago. I'll use the term search as shorthand for Search for Common Ground. Please bear with me as I give you the context of why I'm involved and as I introduce you to our two speakers. In the late 90s, I'd been studying nonviolent communication, NVC is a shorthand, to improve my relationship skills. Learning about search at the fundraiser, I immediately understood that search applies the concepts of nonviolent communication globally as NVC applies them personally. I was hooked. Search's mission is to help parties who consider themselves enemies learn to trust each other, create avenues for collaboration, and to generate breakthroughs for peace. So, currently, Search works in 31 countries around the world. Search's commitment to improving the quality of life for women and children throughout the world aligns with my own personal goals. Search is focused on increasing participation and leadership of women and youth and ensuring their place at the table. I'm thrilled to introduce you to Jacqueline Oburu from Search for Common Ground. She's the Vice President of Human Resources. She's worked in the international development sector for almost 25 years, and she always felt that something was missing, that addressing conflict would deal with root causes of the need. She's now been with Search for 3 years and has come to realize that if organizations working in international development partnered more intentionally with peace-building organizations, outcomes would be much more successful. In turn, Jacqueline will introduce you to Judy Kimamo, the Director of Swahili Coast Programs, who has been with Search for 7 years. Thank you for being here with us today, Jacqueline and Judy.
Thank you, Carol, and good afternoon, everyone. We are so pleased to have you join us today, and we hope that you enjoy and engage in today's discussion. Search for Common Ground is the world's largest peace-building organization and a Nobel Peace Prize nominated organization. We prevent and end violence by helping divided people trust each other, collaborate on shared challenges, and make breakthroughs for peace together. We believe that conflict is inevitable, but violence is not. Conflict is a natural result of human diversity. Handled well, conflict generates dynamism and creative problem solving. Handled poorly, it yields polarization and violence. Our core values are collaboration, audacity, tenacity, empathy, and results. And we believe that we are building a future where collaboration in the face of conflict is the norm, where our differences stimulate social progress rather than precipitate violence. I'm joined by my amazing colleague, Judy Kimamo. Judy is the country director of the Swahili Coast, which includes Kenya and Tanzania. And she has been with Search for 7 years. So I'm going to start by asking Judy some questions, and we will have time after my questions for you to ask any questions and share your own experiences. Hi, Judy.
Hey, hello, Jacqueline.
Hi, how you doing? Good to see you.
I'm well. Good to see you.
Great. So Judy, can you please tell us a bit more about yourself and your work at Search?
Well, where do I start? As Jacqueline said, I'm the Swahili Coast Director, Search for Common Ground. I am based in Mombasa, Kenya, the east coast of Africa, and our work sits along the coastal, the eastern coastal stretch of East Africa, and our work straddles spirituality built over centuries because of trade, migration, sites where we locate our work. However, recently not too long, we've extremism is that the result of the breakdown of Somali country. The country's infrastructure broke down in 1990, and because of the government, many groups and some of them violent extremist groups has impacted the security and the peace of nations. So my work sits in Kenya and borders the work in Somali. We also have work in Tanzania because the tentacles of violent extremism are not just limited to national boundaries, and we go all the way to Mozambique. My team sits in different offices. We have 9 offices, and our work goes not just to reach out to places that are easy to reach. Part of my interventions is to ensure that we get to the last mile, where you go and you find that hardly do government office because of the threats, the existential threat that they face as a result of living in those places. So you find our team reaching out and identifying and establishing contacts and working to bring places. The police will be absent, and military interventions have been put in place as security operations. Those are the places that you find me trading and working and mobilizing and bringing together communities.
Thank you, Judy. You know, we're running into some technology problems. Your voice is going in and out. I wonder if it would help if you would just stop your video. We'd love to see your face, but let's just try with the next question to see if that helps the audio for us.
Okay.
Good. So you've explained that you're on the borders of some.
All right. Okay.
Right. You're on the borders of some really difficult countries in Somalia and East Africa. And you are working in those areas to broker peace. Can you tell us or describe for us or define for us, what is peace building? What does it mean to you?
So peace building for me is the efforts that are in place. The safe societies, healthy societies, where they're able to engage, where they're able to listen to the other side, where they're able to understand the other side, where adversaries begin now to embrace a shared possibility society, and in our own words, what we call a peace architecture. And we realize that when we speak about a peace architecture, it's not just an effort that is a peace agreement that is signed. It's not just a peace meeting that is held and people shake hands. It's more than that. It means that there will be a lot of trust building. There will be a lot of negotiation. There will be a lot of barriers. And a lot of efforts to bring the ability for people to sit in the same space and begin to look at how they can work together to live together in the same society. Building also can just place before conflict. So it means that we're not just having this or grievously impacted. It also means, and we work to stop the violence. And this could mean violence in the form of violent extremism. We have community networks, community knowledge. When we work with women, when we work with youth, when we work with the security actors, we tend to get the knowledge and the intelligence, what we call the early warnings, that help us bring people together quickly to address the threat before it becomes a full-blown violence. So as I said, it could be violent extremism, it could be racial discrimination, and to bring it even much closer home, for us, it means ethnic exclusion. It means ethnic discrimination. It also means sexual violence. We have seen legal gaps, lack of community understanding of the law, or even you find that perpetration of violence sometimes is punished, so that or adversaries can gain advantage over the other. So peace building is that sense of violent conflict, when it's getting into the precipice of a war.
Judy, thank you. We're still having a lot of difficulty hearing you technically. Apologies to everyone for this. We'll see how we can work on this. Picking up some of what you said. Basically, you're talking about having strategies in terms of helping people diffuse tension, mitigate violence, working to just bring communities and people together to find alternative ways to deal with conflict before it becomes violent conflict. Would that be a good, I think that would be a good articulation of what you've been saying. I want to ask you a few more questions. Just want to make sure that our audio is working well, but we'll try this again. We're not going to give up. One thing about search, as I said before, that one of our primary values is tenacity. So we're going to be tenacious and get through this. Judy, I I had the pleasure of having dinner with you a couple of weeks ago in Kilifi, Kenya. And you, at sitting at the dining table, you made a statement that still sits with me, and I've been reflecting on it since that time. You talked about your work with Wangari Maathai, who was a first African female Nobel Peace Prize winner for Greenpeace. And she said, you cannot be a peace builder and be fearful. Can you tell us a little bit about what that meant and what you learned about peace building working alongside of Wangari?
Yes, I had the privilege of working with a very phenomenal woman peace builder, the late Professor Wangari Maathai. And when I joined the Greenbelt movement, when I got in there to ensure that people are in the rivers, planting trees that feed the rivers. And that was my entry point. Very quickly, we got into a space where we realized that for environmental protection to happen, we needed to be straight solid in the governance space. So we started organizing communities to advocate, to talk about their resources and how are their resources. The country quickly turned around, and we got into quite a violent election process where the candidates, right now Kenya is going through, the parties were, the stakes were so high. So when the elections were conducted, it was messy. There were issues around transparency, there were issues around trust, there were issues around trusting the institutions that were handling. And therefore, when the elections were announced, the elections were disputed, they were delayed. The relay of the results was very delayed. And finally, when they were announced, quickly, the president was sworn in. The results were announced like at 4 p.m. And by 6 p.m., the president had been announced and had been sworn in. And the opponents came quickly and contested, and the country broke out into war. And within a few short days, the city of Nairobi became impossible to move through. And I remember trying to organize my family, my children, and I wanted to take them back home to a place of safety where I thought it would be much more safer to have my children in the hands of my mother. But that morning, Professor Wangari Maathai called me and she was like, do you have a moment, Judy? And I was like, well, sure, let me come, but I'll be traveling later in the day. I got to the office, I met a team of elders that had been mobilized by Wangari to come and talk about what was happening in the country and how the elders could intervene. And she asked me to prepare an itinerary that would around the place, a 2-week itinerary. Then she said, okay, please join me to go and help figure out what's happening. I was like, okay. So that was my first time. We walked into the face of violence. We walked into a place where women were screaming on the roads, asking for anybody who was driving by to go help them put a fire in their homes. We walked through communities where young men had blocked the roads, to a point that at one time, our car was marooned by men who were carrying machetes, and they were ready to take us down. But we stopped and had a conversation, a very candid conversation. And that is when I knew that you cannot be fearful as a peace builder. And we had a conversation with those young men, and we got to understand that they were fighting for a cause that really was going to gravely disrupt their lifestyles. and they were able to put their machetes down. And we agreed to get a safe passage through that community. They gave us an escort. And much later, when things had calmed down, we came and organized for soccer tournaments, much later. And they thanked us because they were able to hear, they were able to understand, to get a voice of reason, even when the emotions were very high. We walked into the places where people's homes had been burnt and people had been displaced and taken to big camps. And part of the conversation was, hey, we cannot afford to put people in big camps. Because they soon run out of food. It was in a place of people buried their dead. Their dead was still lying and buried. It was in the place where people had seen their granaries burnt down. There was no food. It was a place where people had left their family, their homes with only one place. So you had women who wanted to wrap their children during the cold nights. So fear became something that I understood cannot be part of what makes a peace builder. And therefore my heart is very fearless.
Judy, what a powerful story. And we're still having connection problems. So fortunately, we heard a lot of what you said, at least to get a sense of your experience and what led you into peace building. And you talked a lot about the ingenuity and the creativity it took and the fearlessness it took to actually enter into that space where you don't fear for your own life. Can you share with us some highlights, some of the experiences you've had in the program that you're working in now at Search in Kenya?
Yes, so I would want to have several examples I could give, but I want to give one that really has made a big difference socially, economically, and politically. So we got into Lamu. Lamu was previously a beautiful tourist destination. And within a short time, we had tourists abducted, attacks conducted on villages where we lost about 75 men. They profiled men and killed them by beheading and shooting. And we had attacks on the roads that had killed even government officials. So we got into that community when the government had declared a ban, a night fishing ban, because Lamu is a community that is along the ocean bordering Somalia and depends a lot on the fishing businesses. Because they are island dwellers, there are many islands in Lamu, and therefore most of the communities get their livelihoods off fishing. And the government banned night fishing because the ocean had been used to as a trafficking conduit, a place where the violent extremists to come and conduct attacks and flee back. The tourists who were abducted in Somalia. So as a measure, the government stopped any movement at night. However, the fishing industry requires that people can go out at night and fish, because that's when it's easier to get the shoals of fish and bring them to shore. So for about 5 years, there had been a ban, and the community was really getting angry and frustrated because they no longer could get an income, a decent income to take their children to school or to put food on the table. And what it was doing, it was actually playing into the hands of the extremists. So people are preferring, hey, if I cannot get a my own village, why don't I go and join Al-Shabaab on the other side, who are offering us some money to engage and come back. So we got into that space and we quickly mobilized the community and the government separately, because at that time we couldn't put them in the same room to agree. But over time, we were able to build confidence on either side to engage, because the common ground at this place is that everybody wanted to be safe. Everybody wanted to be secure. They could earn their livelihoods, or where they could work comfortably. So we had an opportunity to ask them, hey, what if we look at the issues that resulted to the night fishing ban? So the fishermen quickly came with responses and solutions. And they said, for us, we would want to see these minimums for us. We would want to see that we are respected as fishermen, that when we are fishing at night, we are safe. And when we meet with the Navy or the Coast Guard, we are not unduly harassed because we are known fishermen. On the other hand, the government gave their minimums that they want the fishermen to register themselves, to be known, but also to have the people who go out to the ocean. For example, if they go 5 fishermen at night, in the morning, the boat should come back with 5 people. The boat should not come back with 7 people, or the boat should not come back with 3 people. So we agreed. So we had dialogues. We had a series of dialogues. In fact, we conducted 35 meetings to bring the fishermen and the security actors together. And where we have reached right now with that system and that conversation, it has taken us it's from 2017. Where we are right now is that the government has adopted the fishermen registration system that was developed as a result of the talks. And that system has generated a card that is an alternative to say fisherman, because we don't want to lock the women out. We know that there are women involved in the fishing industry. So we call it a fisher folk card. In Swahili, we call it the mvuvi card. So the fishermen can now come, get registered to have, get connected to their government. It took us time to get there, because the first time we tried to get the card out, it was rejected by the Navy, it was rejected by the Marines, it was rejected by the Coast Guard. So it has been a process. It has been a process to a point where government has now out at night and fish, and that can allow them to identify themselves using fingerprints or using a scan, and they can now interact healthily and in a safe manner at night.
That's a great story. So now you have digital fishermen, identity card for fishermen that they can use that police and others recognize. And it mitigates the conflict. That's wonderful.
Yes.
I've been going back and forth. How can we improve this connection? The realities of global internet service. I'm not sure if you have the ability to call in. If not, we can continue and hope for the best. We're still we're hearing them, hopefully it'll continue. But fortunately, we've heard a lot of what you've said in the last two questions. So I'm going to ask you another one, and let's hope we hear that. And you mentioned when you were talking about Wangari, and you also mentioned in this context as a fisherman in Lamu, that you went and you talked to people. And so I'm just wondering, are there any unique challenges to being a female in the peace building field? From what I've heard, it doesn't seem to be, but have you seen any challenges?
Oh yes. First of all, the environment, very insecure, tends to find a lot of male dominance. You find
Okay, Judy,
men seated in every
interrupt.
office. not.
I'm sorry, Judy. We
Yes.
didn't hear a lot of what you said just now.
To see if it gets better. I've even changed the provider.
Okay.
Maybe it's just something about tonight. Yeah, I hope it gets better. Fingers crossed.
Keep going, my dear.
So as
You were
a
saying about
female,
men?
yeah, I was saying in the peace building environment, especially where we have heightened insecurity and high violence, you find that the security actors, and especially the ones who come to the table, tend to be men. So you find it's the clan elders, and the clan elders will be men. You find it is the clergy, and the clergy will be men. You find that it will be policemen, and because they consider it as a high security zone, it will be policemen, no policewomen. When we're looking at administrators, the chiefs, the village elders, it will be men. So the place of women really is very small. And the place of women even gets smaller when you bring in the religious aspect of it. Because in the areas where we work, the role of women is never meant to be at the table, is never meant to be at a place where you can sit at a decision-making place, and is at a place that you cannot stand before men. So some of the challenges that I face is that first I have to make sure that I have access to those tables, and that my presence in those tables is significant. I remember one time I walked into the regional commissioner's office, and I was introducing a project that was working with youth in difficult environments, and some of those difficult environments included the criminal gangs. And he said, hey, I cannot allow you to carry on with a project that's a betting crime. And he threatened, because it was a security meeting, I was introducing my activities in a security meeting, and there were about 5 gentlemen. One of them was a police commander, and he said, right now, I can use my authority to arrest you for a betting crime. And the RC went ahead to say, you know, I'll not have you babysitting criminals under my watch. And the meeting became very tense and very hostile. But I told them, hey, I'm not talking about a community where I don't live in. I'm talking about a community where I cannot walk at night to go and make a money transaction, because I'm not sure I'll go back home with my phone. I'm not sure I'll go back with my money. So the guys turned away from me and turned back to them. They're like, hey, which place in Mombasa is that she lives that is quite inaccessible? So those are the challenges that we face. When you go to some communities, I literally have to cover up. I have to camouflage myself. I have to wrap myself in a manner that I cannot be known, that I'm not one of them. And I even sometimes do not talk. So if I'm going, for example, to Hulugo, I will not use the office vehicle. I will not use any modern means of transport. I'll look for the most rickety means of transport in that community, and look for some of their opinion leaders to drive me through the village to the place where I need to go do some of my meetings. And in transit, sometimes transit takes me 5-6 hours. You find that there's no internet, there's no communication, and we have agreed that I cannot speak when the car is stopped on the road by anybody. I cannot speak because my accent will sell me out. And when we get to the other end, the first time I went through like 5 landmines, and one had just exploded the day before. So the ground was very raw. There was soil everywhere. But what happens is that when you get to that place and you find a community that is desperate, that has been left in the hands of God knows what, they find that somebody has taken their time, their energy, and their confidence to go and listen to them. We have had transformative efforts. We've had women come on board. women begin to engage with the military, women begin to be the ones that are the influencers, women being the ones that have now begun encouraging the young people to have conversations around their fears, their worries, their mental health. Women have taken it up upon themselves. The final one about being a woman peace builder is that it also draws you away. As you may know that back here, we have triple roles. We have the reproductive role, we have to take care of our families, our children, and we are looked upon to be the ones that really are nurturing our families. So sometimes it takes you away for a long time and you come back and you find that everybody's asking, hey, ma'am, where have you been? Hey, you cannot travel. Hey, we want to go with you. But it's some places that really you cannot really venture into. So those are some of the challenges, the underlying challenges that face women frontliners, women who are in the front, building bridges for communities to walk across.
Thank you, Judy. Something miraculous just happened. We heard all of that.
Awesome.
And we also heard your passion. I want to give time for others to ask questions. So I'm just going to ask you one more question, and then we'll open it up to have others ask questions. And so still on the theme of women, what are some advances that you hope to see in the field of peace building for women?
We recognize the very important role of women. If you look at the current war in Ukraine and Russia, if you see the kind of interventions that are being proposed, they're bringing more weapons, bringing more guns, let us flatten the steel mills. That is a male conversation because it's a conversation around dominance, it's a conversation around conquering, and it's a conversation that does not have any empathy in it. If it was women in there, I listened to the EU chief, the lady speaking yesterday, and her conversation was not cut. It was not, let us go and flatten the enemy. She said that we are going to have a progressive withdrawal of the dependence of fuel. So when we have women in peace building spaces, you find that the conversations tend to be more protective. They tend to cushion the communities from adverse harm, and they tend to bring back people together. In Namu, where we had attacks recently that were trying to separate the Christians and the Muslims, and people the Christian women had been isolated in camps again, they were the first to come back to start talking to each other. They were like, hey, we need to access the hospital because the hospital was on one side, the schools were on the other, and the market was in the other. So the people who get the first impact of violence are the women. They cannot access the hospitals, they cannot go to the markets, they cannot go to the farms. So they are the ones who then come back and quickly begin forming the fabric that knits the community together. So at the very lowest level, you find women put a lot of effort. They put a lot of effort, which is unrecognized, towards protecting their families, protecting their homes, and protecting their communities. At national level, you find that where we have women sitting in conversations around coalitions, reducing negative political competition, you find that they are able to sit down and mitigate. I remember when Kenya went into a deep crisis, Wangari Maathai was able to convene Kofi Annan. There was Jakaya Kikwete, there was Desmond Tutu. She was able to meet them at night. She would call them to meetings, which I sat in the background. She would call them in meetings from 10 to 3 a.m. in the morning. And they would unpack, because it was a process, they were trying to mediate. So she'd call them at night and they would unpack what they had during the day. And they would should help them think through what they need to do the next day when they meet the political actors. So you find that women play a very special role. They can do a lot of mediation, they can do a lot of convening, but also they are able to provide a very long-term perspective to peace building. We have a place. What I've seen and what I've heard as people saying, they say, hey, Judy, I think the reason why your initiatives are this long-term and impactful is because you're a woman. And I'm like, yeah, we are able to see far. We are able to design, and we do not act at the spur of the moment.
Wonderful. Thank you, Judy. Thank you so much. Well, now I'm sure that there are others who have questions for Judy and would like to open this up for questions. There is a section in this is Q&A for you to put your questions. Let's start. I see the first question. It says, search for common ground. What is it? And have you found it yet?
Oh, yes. So peace is a process. Peace is really a process. And when you think you have arrived, you find that, okay, there's still more ground to cover. So for example, if I would use the local environments where we are working, you find that when we began engaging the communities in Lamu, and they began finding opportunities to work together to improve the night fishing environment, we went on, but then over time, a port was, what would I call it? A landing port, a commercial port where the ships come and dock was built. And what it did again, it started displacing the fishermen, because what they did, they dredged the ocean and made it deeper so that the big machines could come through to the harbor. And it disturbed the water, and the water became so rough such that, again, the fishermen could not access their fishing places because of that huge disturbance that was created. And the fishermen were up in arms again against the government, seeking compensation, seeking to be compensated because of this huge economic project that came. And quickly, you find that the conversations that you had built, the trust that you have built between the government and the fishermen quickly got eroded. And you have to come and restart again. So that people do not use adversarial, confrontational kinds of engagement, that we bring people back to the meeting room. You find things like you've built a community network of young people, very solid. Then COVID strikes. And the young people that you've been working with all of a sudden go back into their homes, and the women all of a sudden get exposed to domestic violence, the sexual related violence. And because there's curfews, there's limitations, there's lockdowns, it means that they cannot access justice. They cannot walk to the police stations where they had access, where they're having meetings with the police officer or the policemen who had opened their police stations to be places where youth could meet. You find that it gets broken and they no longer have access. So what do? You have to create a conversation again very quickly with the actors and say, how do we support that anybody who is facing a sexual domestic violence can go to report to a police station, either online, can have the court hearing. Even when the courts were closed, we negotiated for access, that there was some room for court hearings to go on, even when the lockdown was tightest. Or the border, the people who ferry, the young people who use motorbikes to earn a living by ferrying people from one point to another. When the lockdown came in, they were the first to be targeted by security actors as people who are breaching the curfew orders. And some of them got killed, some of them got arrested, Many of them lost their motorbikes because they were supposed to go to court, and therefore their motorbikes were held in the police stations. So that means we had to go back again and renegotiate the importance of this informal transport sector and their importance to ferry people at night when there are curfews. They needed to ferry women to hospital. They needed to take people to police stations. They needed to move around, help the community have some limited movement in times of emergencies. So yes, it's a process. When you build, you find that it's like a Lego. You've added a Lego to the brick, but there are very many other scattered Legos that still need to be put in place. Then an event happens and the Legos are all dismantled. So it is a process. It is a process. And that is why you find that we've got now Search for Common Ground. 2016, for example, brought together youth around the world, and they have a resolution that has been adopted by the Security Council, the Youth, Peace and Security resolution that is called 2250, which Search helped put together, and it recognizes the role of youth. So the point of bringing youth together is that they've understood their common ground. How do they engage? How do they collaborate? But now they realize that we need to have a law that protects our spaces so that there's funding, that the youth are included in decision-making tables, that youth are protected. So when politicians are busy fighting, that it is not youth who are used as the weapons to fight the adversaries, that there's protection. So it's a process, it's a process.
And even in the midst of a pandemic, there is still a way to find common ground.
Oh, yes.
Great stories. We have a couple more questions, so I want to really be mindful of the time. I know everyone is, but I have, the next one is, and I'll answer this one, Judy. I'll give you the last one. So do we have a program like this in the United States? And the answer to that is yes, we just launched Common Ground USA at the end of 2021. One of its first initiatives in this is what we call First Year Connect. And it's an orientation program for newly matriculated college students where they engage in conversations with other students across political, religious, and ethnic lines. So like Judy has just said, you bring in the youth because they actually understand what it means to find common ground. It's a new generation. And so our Common Ground USA is fully, well, it's not fully staffed, but it's in full effect now. And we're partnering on a project called First Year Connect. The second question, Judy, which I'm hoping you can answer. If not, I can probably answer it. Is search working in Ukraine? And well, there's two questions. Is search working in Ukraine, and what does search think is the solution for ending the conflict there?
Jacqueline?
Yes.
Take it
up. Okay. Yeah, I certainly will.
Yes.
No, search is not working in Ukraine. At this time, we don't have a country office in Ukraine. However, we are involved in closed door meetings in which we are sharing our expertise and advice with top officials. This is not uncommon for us. Often we can access spaces and people, and that more formal delegation can happen now. But as for the solution to conflict, there are two areas, and the top priority is to stop the bloodshed. Judy talked about that just a few minutes ago. There can be no progress towards peace while rockets are still being fired. And the international community needs to rally around the terms of any agreement that Ukrainian and Russian leaders may reach. And then our second thing we've recommended is that we must also reverse the path towards isolation and militarism that this war has created. A peaceful resolution to this conflict in Ukraine is our best chance to modernize the international multilateral system and to prevent future tragedy. I know that we are at the end of this. I want to, first of all, say, Judy, thank you so much. We've had a rough journey in getting this session going, but I think it picked up some steam at just the right time. And I'd like to turn this over to Carol now. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you, Jacqueline and Judy, for all you've done to make this event happen. I can't say it's been easy. And thank you to our wonderful guests who've, I hope, have been engaged despite the discontinuity in the program. And in any case, you certainly have been exposed to Search's vision and to many of the methods and strategies and flexibility that our staff shows every day. This was the final Outdoor Art Club webinar of the spring, and we hope to see you again in the fall when the Outdoor Art Club will present our next speaker series.